Brussels, the capital of Belgium. As we know, most of the European Union institutions are located here, where Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has special connections. And he has just accomplished something very important. As I announced, Poland has been exempted from the obligation to accept migrants under the EU relocation mechanism. And so, a great success has been trumpeted. We have delivered 100% of what we agreed with Poles and 100% of what we promised. The problem is that in this situation there is nothing to boast about. Let us recall. This is about the so-called solidarity mechanism of the Migration Pact, that is, accepting illegal immigrants from Africa and Asia into EU countries. While Italy, Spain, Greece and Cyprus have been excluded from the relocation mechanism, Bulgaria, Croatia and Poland, among others, have been recognized as countries facing a serious migration situation and may ask the EU Council for an exemption from relocation, but only for the immediate future. If the decision is positive, it will only cover 6 months, because the Migration Pact comes into force in mid-2026. The EU will be able to graciously agree to the Polish government's humble request, or not. The decision has been taken out of the hands of the Polish government and handed over to the EU, even though this matter does not even fall within the EU's treaty powers. A complete failure for Donald Tusk. No one can outplay me in the EU government. However, the December 13th coalition is digging its heels in and attacking the right wing for telling it like it is. We would like to draw attention to the misinformation spread by right-wing politicians, including MP Brilka, who wrote that the decision had not been made, when in fact it had. Meanwhile, the European Council's website clearly states, after today's political agreement on the solidarity pool, the Council will still have to formally adopt the implementing decision. This will happen after legal scrubbing and translation before 31st December 2025. The government's narrative is supported by former Deputy Minister of Internal Affairs and Administration, Maciej Duszczyk, who boasts that the European Union has made a final decision. Responding to emerging manipulations, the decision adopted today on solidarity in the Migration Pact, in which Poland is completely exempt, is final and non-negotiable. Now it is only being translated into all languages. This is a formality. It may be a formality, but the key information is not that Poland will be among the countries facing a serious migration situation, but that we will not have to accept migrants during a certain period. And here, the European Council's statement comes to the rescue again. Everywhere we read about 2026. Therefore, saying Poland will not accept migrants at all is misleading. We believe that this is simply a game primarily related to the prospect of elections in many important European countries, and Poland is an important European country. What is more, it is not Poland but Cyprus, Greece, Italy and Spain that will be able to benefit from the full pool of solidarity funds. It is by no means the case that we will receive any assistance in this regard, even though several million migrants have passed through Poland in recent years. It is simply deeply unfair that we are not to receive such assistance. There are many indications that bureaucrats in Brussels have gained another tool to control and influence the policies of European countries. It is not without reason that the solidarity mechanism is referred to by many as forced solidarity. The European Union has created a mechanism that assumes it will control the democratic process in individual countries and, for example, there will be elections and a government that they do not like, and then the Migration Pact will come into play. We should be the ones to decide who comes to our country, how they will be able to harmonize with our Polish culture, with our national identity. For the government and the December 13th coalition, whatever happens, the most important thing is, as we can see, to talk about promises and successes. However, some people forget that Poles are a nation that cannot be fooled by cheap tricks. After numerous Russian drones, smuggling balloons, provocations on the border with Belarus, Vilnius airport temporarily closing, and strategic facilities being threatened, Lithuania is responding to the threat from the east by declaring a state of emergency. The hybrid attack by the Belarusian regime is forcing us to take such measures. Balloons carrying contraband sent to the border and drones appearing in the vicinity of Vilnius airport pose a threat to civil aviation and, above all, to our citizens and visitors. Lithuanian services report at least 600 various Russian and Belarusian provocations since the beginning of the year, aimed at destabilizing Lithuania. Russian agents have taken a particular liking to the international airport in Vilnius.
In the last 2 months, which is a very high number, and 350 flights were affected, which had more than 50,000 passengers. So on one hand, it's only 5% of our total traffic.
Lithuanians are concerned because Russian and Belarusian aggression against their country is increasing.
The public is very annoyed because of this. I mean, those who don't travel, probably not, but those who travel.
The introduction of a state of emergency means close cooperation with the Lithuanian military, which will be present both at the border with Belarus and near critical infrastructure facilities. There will be more detailed checks and additional security procedures will be introduced, since Lithuania is a member of NATO.
Ataki hybrydowe na Litwę powodują mobilizację.
Hybrid attacks on Lithuania are causing the country to mobilize. As we know, countries such as Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia have Russian minorities and are particularly vulnerable to such attacks. And these countries are the target of Russia's strategic intentions. But they are not the only ones, because we know that such things have also happened in Poland, the Czech Republic and other Central European countries. Russian smuggling balloons have appeared in Latvia, and Russian drones have been spotted near airports in Munich, Prague, Aalborg in Denmark, as well as in Romania and Slovakia. In addition, there have been violations of airspace and territorial waters in the Baltic Sea. This is a hybrid war waged by the Russian Federation against the North Atlantic Alliance, including Poland, the Baltic states, and other countries in the region. Unfortunately, we are facing increasingly stronger provocations, which are becoming more frequent, and we must also expect that they will continue to take place. Russian provocations and acts of sabotage have intensified, particularly in Poland, and the threat is real and serious. Beyond the obvious cases of blowing up railways, there was a series of mysterious arson attacks targeting warehouses in the capital, a housing estate in Ząbki near Warsaw, a supermarket in Grodziec Mazowiecki, a Warsaw metro station, and a bus depot in Bytom. There have been quite a few incidents, which may mean that Russian agents and saboteurs are operating more freely on NATO territory. Russia is the aggressive party in all these actions. It is Russia that is pushing for conflict, not the Baltic states, not Finland, nor anyone else. The Russians are doing everything they can to start a war in Europe because it is in their interest. They are testing NATO's patience, engaging the responses they get, testing whether it is a credible alliance. The Kremlin's growing aggression directed towards NATO should be an alarm bell for all of Europe. The future of Europe is at stake.
Europe is heading in the wrong direction, says U.S. President Donald Trump, referring to the penalty imposed by the European Commission on the American social media platform X. The Americans accuse Eurocrats of attacking freedom of speech, as they also wrote in their national security strategy. Do Brussels' decisions mean another chapter in the conflict with its American ally? It is difficult to imagine a world without social media today. Just yesterday, we used posts on platform X several times in our news program. But the European Commission says no and imposes heavy fines on X. U.S. President Donald Trump commented on the situation.
I don't think it's right. No, I don't think it's right. I don't see, how they can do that. No. I'll speak about it later. I'm going to get a full report on it.
Elon Musk, the owner of the X platform, echoed his sentiments, repeatedly criticizing European institutions on social media over the past few days. How long before the EU is gone? Abolish the EU. The storm was triggered by a €120 million fine imposed on Platform X by the European Commission.
X has indeed breached its transparency obligation under the DSA. This includes X's blue checkmark. It deceives users.
But Americans see these decisions not as a defense of social media users, but as an attack on freedom of speech. According to the White House, there is a whole list of such attacks on civil liberties by European institutions. You can read about it in the recently published U.S. National Security Strategy. The biggest problems facing Europe include actions by the European Union and other supranational institutions that undermine political freedom and sovereignty, migration policies that are transforming the continent and causing conflict, censorship of free speech and suppression of political opposition, declining birth rates, and the loss of national identities and self-confidence. Only strong nation-states, proud of their identities, can, according to Washington, be the basis for good transatlantic relations. The document continues. The question of America's attitude towards Europe makes it clear that Europe must regain its strength, and it can only regain its strength if it returns to the basic principles of its development, to the sovereignty of nations, and to its capacity for economic development. But the Americans cannot count on any reflection on the part of the European Union, because according to the Eurocrats, the old continent is currently the quintessence of freedom.
Any such criticism regarding the liberties here should be aimed at a different direction. Russia, perhaps, where dissent is banned, where free media is banned, where political opposition is banned, where X or Twitter, as we know it, is in fact also banned.
The head of Polish diplomacy went a step further, comparing Elon Musk to a Russian oligarch in a not very diplomatic way. Oligarchs Dmitriev and Musk want to partition Europe to dominate and exploit us. Should we capitulate or make Europe great again? Elon Musk's critics are not giving up and exercising their freedom of speech by falsely accusing him, among other things, of making a Nazi gesture. But if you find a longer version of this video, you can see that the businessman is saying thank you to everyone with all his heart.
My heart goes out to you.
There may soon be more conflicts between the European Commission and the White House, as Eurocrats are investigating other American internet giants, accusing them of monopolistic practices.
South Korea scrambled its fighter jets and put its air forces on alert after Chinese and Russian aircraft entered its air defense identification zone. Moscow and Beijing are strengthening their military cooperation. Joint training flights in the Far East are focused on offensive scenarios. This coincides with increasingly tense relations between Beijing and America's allies in the region, Seoul, Tokyo, and Taipei. Similar incidents are becoming more frequent in the region, and analysts indicate they are not accidental. This was not a violation of airspace, but an entry into the South Korean identification zone. Seoul requires aircraft approaching South Korean territory to provide flight details and the pilot's intentions. 7 Russian and 2 Chinese military aircraft entered the zone. For an hour, despite attempts to establish contact, they did not respond to calls for identification. South Korea sent its own aircraft in their direction. The incident occurred just 2 days after another provocative action by the Chinese Air Force. On Sunday, one of the fighter jets taking off from a Chinese aircraft carrier locked onto a Japanese F-15 flying towards it. China's radar lock-on was a dangerous action that went beyond what was necessary for the safe flight of the aircraft, and it is extremely regrettable that such an incident occurred. We have lodged a strong protest with the Chinese side and firmly demanded that this not happen again in the future. We are responding calmly but firmly. Japan has been on a diplomatic collision course with China ever since conservative Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, who openly supports Taiwan's sovereignty, took office. Beijing is beginning to test the reactions of Taipei's potential allies more and more strongly, including their military response procedures. Beijing should not resort to aggressive rhetoric to intimidate others or denigrate U.S. policy positions. Such behavior not only highlights its hegemonic attitude, but also exposes China's belligerent nature. Beijing is reacting harshly to the new U.S. security doctrine, which focuses significantly on the Indo-Pacific region. According to experts, China is clearly preparing for confrontation. Very often, military cooperation between China and Russia is said to be about improving the coordination of armed forces, but it is also about signaling strategic unity. Finally, it is a challenge to the security architecture that the United States represents in the Indo-Pacific region. What the West seems to be unaware of is the fact that a war is already underway, not in the form of kinetic strikes on the battlefield, but in the areas of economics, cybersecurity, and even ecology. Billions of yuan are being pumped into lobbying, marketing, and displacing Western companies. Espionage is at a level never seen before.
So you spend hours flying over China, and everybody has their aircraft Wi-Fi turned on. But what they don't realize is, and in fairness to the Wi-Fi providers, it says this is an unsecure connection, da-da-da-da. When you're flying over China, all your emails, your WhatsApps, your everything are going up from their satellite terminal on the aircraft to a satellite, a commercial satellite, that's not the Outernet, is being landed in a Chinese ground gateway, and everything is being intercepted.
Worse still, according to NATO planners' predictions, Beijing is coordinating its operations with Moscow. Attempts to influence the Chinese president with trips by European leaders are ineffective. What's more, it is almost certain that any strike on Taiwan will be preceded by an escalation of the situation in Eastern Europe, on the North Atlantic Alliance's eastern flank. If Xi Jinping does decide to attack Taiwan, he will first call Putin and ask him to further inflame the conflict in Europe. While there is a war going on in Ukraine, China and Russia are now testing how the United States and its main allies in Asia will react. On top of that, Europe is currently tied to China's technological leash. Most production, even European production, relies on Chinese components. Domestic industry is being displaced by goods from China, and dependence on Beijing could backfire if, in the event of a conflict, China simply cuts off the supply chains.